This is Visions Under Construction.
Sure is.
A chance for our guests to share their visions and tell us what they're working on.
They're not working on anything because we don't have any guests. Their continued support, we would like to thank Simwood, straight-talking, forward-thinking telecoms. Simwood.com. And Simon Woodhead will be at Astracon.
Why not
the
make
keynote.
Cloudonics your communication partner? Go to cloudonics.io.
And Eric will be there too.
You can find everything about the VUC at vuc.me. Thanks to Bluehost. And thanks also to zipdx.com, the conference bridge, and to voxphone.com for local rate dial-ins.
You cannot find out everything about the VUC at those locations, but you can find out some things, okay? Greetings and welcome to Visions Under Construzione. We are going to have a special guest in a few minutes. It's Corrado Mela, who's going to be joining us, but before he does, we have another special guest. It's Jay Carpenter, who's actually not a special guest because he's one of the regulars now. Jay, you can unmute and say hello. Don't forget to unmute. There we go.
Sorry about that. I was muted. So hello.
Hello to
you.
you.
On the VC.
We're going to hear a little bit about
Hello.
everybody's weeks, starting with you probably, and maybe moving on to James, who also needs to unmute. James?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. And unmuted.
God, I see everybody on the street has those funny white things dangling from their ears.
Yeah, they're AirPods. AirPods. No wires. Completely wireless. Welcome to the 21st century.
Oh, there's another way to call it, which is another thing to charge. Okay, and Mr. Andy Smith is with us from some shire of something kind. Or...
Dorsetshire, or down towards the south coast, although it's just called Dorset. Yeah, hello.
Dorset, yeah. I will never fathom the United Kingdom's nomenclature, but anyway. Let's see. As far as what happened to me this week, not that much. I did have occasion to have the 5-course tasting meal at Tommy Shan's here in Bordeaux. This guy is a world-class, world-famous Asian chef, and I invite you all to come and participate in that someday. What's this clicking noise? Is that your charger for those white things dangling out of your ears, James? Because it's you, because you tend to take the focus.
I'm terribly sorry.
Click, click, click. Tell us about what you have behind you before we turn Jay loose.
What do I have behind me? What, these things with the flashy
racks?
lights?
No, the racks. What's in the top rack that I see? The top shelf behind you there.
Yes.
Directly behind you.
Directly behind me. No, they're just shelves.
I've
got this thing here is it's a 4G. Yeah, this thing here is a 4G router, a Chalk Mobile. It's a Huawei router.
Oh, Chalk.
Of the type that we'll be using with Chalk Mobile. And that's what we've been doing this week. Andy and I have been putting together configuring the back end, or trying to configure the back end for the launch of Chalk Mobile, the first publicly owned 4G mobile network operator, which we're deploying here in the Chalk Valley, which incidentally today is the largest mobile hotspot in the south of England.
Amazing. And if you need help configuring the back end, I think you should contact Kim Kardashian for that. We're going to let Jay take it away. Jay, talk about one of the topics you mentioned first. What happened to you this week, for example, would be great.
Okay, well, before I get into that, Randy, I would like to ask James, what is a publicly owned 4G network? Or have you guys already talked about that and it's old news?
Oh, no, I don't think we have.
That sounds very, very interesting.
Right. So instead of being owned by a private company like Vodafone or O2, this network will be owned by the community. We've set up something called a community interest company, a CIC. It's a special kind of company which is owned by the community, and the community sign up, invest either with cash or with work, and then become a shareholder in this community interest company.
That is fascinating. I would love to hear more about that, because that is very much akin to what's happening in this decentralized realm of constructs like what I'll be talking about in a moment. So
Yeah.
I think your approach is, at least for me, it's something I'm very, very interested in.
Indeed. And the reason we've done it is that by setting up a community interest company, we can drop out of the equation a whole bunch of the expensive components that normally a mobile network operator would have to pay for. So, for example, things like way leaves, which is kind of the rent that you would have to pay to put a fiber optic cable across somebody's land. You just make the landowner a shareholder in the community interest company, and you just don't pay it, basically.
Cool.
It's an example, but there are lots of other ways we slice cost out of the equation. And then the other clever bit about it is it operates in what is known in the trade as multi-operator neutral host. That means it gives service to anybody who comes near it, and we can authenticate.
Awesome.
Could you explain that last, James? Anybody who comes near that you can authenticate.
Yeah, so normally a mobile network will offer service to their own subscribers and will only allow roamers if they have some kind of roaming agreement. The way we've set up ours is that we don't have any native users of our own, not as mobile users. We do as fixed wireless broadband, but not as mobile users. So what that means is that anybody with a Vodafone, O2, EE, or 3 handset will, when they drop off their own network, will see our network and just roam onto it and get normal service.
That's fantastic.
And the reason we're doing it that way is that we don't want to have to operate a billing and rating engine, because they are quite complicated and they're quite expensive to set up and run. And so by just relying on people from other networks roaming on, it means that they get to do the billing and rating, and then we just do a wholesale settlement at the back end for traffic, which just simplifies the whole thing enormously.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So there we are. But
so James, what I've got a comment when you're done.
Yeah, and another thing which is quite new is the impact that has on the business model. So a traditional mobile network operator will make the bulk of their revenue out of charging for traffic, so either minutes, SMS, or megs of data. But a community interest company running Monet, like Chalk Mobile, the revenue streams will come from a slightly different area, and that will be from the multiple application slices that sit upon the network. So to give you an example, in UK, the emergency services, that's police, fire and ambulance, are just about to turn off their digital radio and move all of their communications onto 4G, 5G. The problem with that is it only works where you've got a mobile network in place. So one of the things we're working on is supporting the emergency services network slice, but on our radio system, on our radio network. And what that means is that then we will then provide the service and then get a chunk of money for providing the capability to the emergency services. So it's not traffic based, but it's application based. So that's one example, but there are many others. So completely different business model.
Interesting.
Cool. I would love to hear more about that, because what you're talking about is very much along the lines of a decentralized dimensions for what was centralized in the past. So not only is the technology decentralized, but also your business models decentralized. It's like crowdsourced. And that is very much along the lines of what's happening in the entire decentralized movement.
Yes, and well, we can take it a little bit further. We're not there yet, but I can see a time in the near future where we'll be integrating blockchain into the authentication mechanism. So putting blockchain into the SIMs, bearing in mind that a SIM is capable of running applications independently from the handset or user equipment. And then what that means is that you'll have a means of doing billing and settlement, which is independent of the core accounting system. So you'll be able to do settlement between individual devices with no centralized billing mechanism. And that all of a sudden starts to get extremely exciting.
So the only thing you're missing, James, because
Exactly.
you got blockchain and you got the phone network and all that. So the only thing you need to integrate now is something to do with AI so that you can talk about that.
Well, that's the people running it, have artificial intelligence, I'm afraid.
Well, that will come as well, because AI is just a big kind of driver for a whole load of these application slices. So going back about 2 minutes, I said that a major chunk of the revenue for within this business model will actually come from applications, and the majority of those are going to be AI driven. So you're actually charging individuals for those application services, but not for the traffic. So effectively, the amount of money we can get out of the traffic is so small. We'll just give the traffic away for free, as long as we can make money out of the applications. Different business model.
Mm. Okay.
So anyway, that's my piece. Jay, we're dying to hear what you've been up to this week and some of the exciting blockchain related things that are going on in the States. So tell us what you've been up to.
Take it away, Jay.
Well, first and foremost, I am tired of the term blockchain. It's so 2017, and I'm moving more towards decentralized constructs, but the common term is blockchain. So in any case, there were two things that happened this week that I think are of interest. First of all, we had a very exciting session in Phoenix on smart cities, public administration, blockchain, and prototypes. And I'll screen share if that's okay and just kind of show you some highlights here. But we had the Assistant Chief Information Officer of the City of Phoenix and the Deputy Chief or Chief Information Officer of the City of Phoenix talking about their initiatives in blockchain and smart cities. So this is the meetup, and we had we had over 100 people that signed up, and then we had about 70, 80 that showed up. So this is the Assistant Chief Information Officer of the City of Phoenix and his deputy. And we also had a very interesting company called Local Motors, which is making autonomous vehicles, and they're 3D printing them, or at least the majority of them. And this is also, James, a crowdsourced company where they've got about 150,000 members around the world that contribute to the design of these autonomous vehicles, which, by the way, can not only can start to constitute a cellular network and a broadband network, because you basically put cellular service and broadband on these autonomous vehicles, but they can also start to become part of the power grid, so that you basically got a battery on wheels that can be charged and discharged at various locations at various times during the day, depending on the demand for electricity.
Oh, I see. So when they're plugged in, and the grid has excess capability, they charge. But when there's peak load and the grid needs electricity, then they discharge. Is that right?
That's correct. And you can incorporate payment methods into that mix so that basically, you're charging, financially charging people that are using the electricity, based upon the amount of electricity they use, the time of day, and all that sort of thing. So it becomes somewhat akin to what you're working with your chalk system, James and Andy.
Yes.
Where all of a sudden you start to have crowdsourced broadband, communications, and electricity, which is very interesting in my view.
Yeah, well, I can see that model working particularly well when you have a real-time spot price for electricity, which depends on availability and demand. So
I'm sorry you cut out there a little bit, James.
Yeah.
It froze.
James.
Gone for now.
Yeah,
Hello, Corrado.
Hello.
Thank you.
See you.
Huh.
Let's get
So
into
all back to screen sharing.
go
What's
ahead.
that?
No, I was going to say go ahead. Just was going to say go ahead. Continue, please.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Pray thee, continue.
Okay, so here's the rest. So we had 4 segments basically. We had the City of Phoenix talking about smart cities. We had Local Motors talking about how their autonomous vehicles fit into a smart cities construct, as well as communications. And then we had a couple fellows who have a company in virtual reality, augmented reality, and how that fits into smart cities. And then we had Oracle talking about their smart cities platform. And then we opened it up for questions and so forth. But let me show you, here's a picture of the fellow from Oracle talking about their blockchain construct for smart cities and some of the applications around the world. And then this is the fellows from the virtual reality, augmented reality, talking about how that can all fit into the smart cities construct. So to get back to the automated vehicles, this is something called Open Innovations. I showed the video for this at the start of our smart cities. But basically, they're doing some interesting things using both blockchain and IoT. They won a contest in the, I believe it was the United Arab Emirates about a year and a half ago to help them win $100,000. But this is a very, very interesting application. It starts to combine a whole bunch of different things. So here's their video. If you're interested in that, it's about a 4-minute video, which I'm not going to play right now. So that's one of the things before I get into the other item. And I'll stop screen sharing. So any questions about all that stuff?
I have a general question about smart cities. What do you define as a smart city? Well,
I kind of started off by showing a picture of Burning Man, and some people scratched their heads and said, how does this relate to smart cities? But in my view, Burning Man is kind of a first take on smart cities, because you've got all this creativity, all this innovation, and basically, and you've got a ton of electronics in Burning Man, and it's a totally different realm of civilization and basically creating something from scratch. You've got a bare desert floor and put up a city of 75,000 people and then tear it down. That's pretty dynamic in my view. So I use that as an example, but smart cities, I would say, is like a new realm of connectedness and sort of repurposing various things for different applications, as well as a huge collection of data from sensors and cameras and that sort of thing. So we're really at the beginning of sort of a melting together of many things that were very separate in the past are coming together and as we speak. Does that make sense, Andy?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I wasn't sure whether a smart city in these terms means more about communication than anything else. And it would seem that that's the case. I mean, the various people have been going on about smart buildings and IoT in buildings and different uses of IoT in various places. But smart cities is more like a more global construct.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the coming together of data, computation, communications, payments, the Internet of Things, devices. All of these things are starting to become connected and starting to work in a harmonized fashion. If that makes sense.
I mentioned this last week, Jay, you were with us, I'm pretty sure. Maybe it wasn't last week, but when I was in Minnesota, I mentioned that in the city of Minneapolis, they had a different system. Here in Bordeaux, we have an app where you pay for your parking. In Minneapolis, they had a kind of a kiosk wherever there would be places where you would buy the ticket to show in the car. There was no ticket to put on your dashboard. There was a sign with the number of the meter there. So apparently it's all data and no, piece of paper that you have to stick in your dash. And I was just wondering if they even got to that level of detail, what they're doing, because parking is a pretty good example of smart city, I think, right? Isn't that an aspect of it? Right?
Absolutely.
What do they do in Phoenix, for example?
If you could, well, first of all, they've put meters completely downtown that are 24/7 now. So you have to pay for parking no matter what time of day it is, or even if it's a holiday, which is interesting.
That totally sucks. I mean, is that what they call? Is that what we're going to call progress? I don't like that.
It's expensive, smart city, but in any case, they certainly upgraded, and this is nothing new, but where you can put in your debit card and pay, for your parking that way. But it's a natural progression to imagine that you can start to pay for things simply from an image where they're reading your face recognition or whatever. Just becomes more and more automated and integrated. I would say the biggest thing that's missing right now is effective identity. So identity, I think, is the key piece, that if we had a workable realm of identity, it could open up some amazing things in smart cities as well as general applications. So
can I differ with there? Do you think it's possible?
Sure.
Totally
Go ahead.
Opposing. We're civilized people here. Actually, the thought crosses my mind that the way the trams work here, you can buy a card for a single voyage, but you can also buy a card. I generally buy for 10 trips. Okay. These trips are good for an hour. I'm looking at the parallel with parking. So you've got an investment of, 10 pounds or $10 or whatever, and you have a reserve of money. And the old ones used a system, I don't even know how it worked, but the newer ones, I think, must be NFC. Is that the right one? No, RFID, sorry. Because these are flat pieces of paper. I have it in my pocket, but I don't detect any chip or anything. And they're throwaway stuff. They're good for 10. And yet you're able to use them as a badge. So I don't know what that is. I don't know what the technology is, but I do know that in my opposition to what you're talking about identity, I would much rather have that thing that I could give to my wife and say, if you need to park, here it is, or friends, they're in town. So I'd rather have the anonymous, not hiding anything. This is a piece that's just like cash, and you put that up to the meter if you were going to do that. I think that the Minneapolis solution I just described, which is kind of, in a way, it's sort of low tech. It's server operated, right? It's the centralization, because all you do is type in a number. So there's no, on the endpoint, you don't have any intelligent card or anything. I don't know if I'm blithering or being clear, but the point is that level was just typing in a number, and then that number goes down to the central, and then they're informed and they know that you paid for such and such a time. Whereas the model I described for the tram, you put it next to the meter and it deducts one trip. And furthermore, if you have 3 kids with you, you can do it 4 times and do 4 trips. Anyway, that's my take on it. I would rather not move so much to something like, you know, you get on the tram or you go to the parking place. Randy, long time no see. Yeah, you got a nice spot here. You know, I don't really want that familiarity. And furthermore, do you really want the record of where you've been, which Google has anyway, and would be happy to communicate to the authorities if need be. Anyway, that's my opposition to you. I think I heard Corrado wanted to jump in.
I have a little input that I have an app on my phone that detects where I am, and if there are any parking spaces managed by this company, I can pay from my mobile phone. My account is connected to my credit card, and I just have to tap a couple of taps on the handset, and I paid for how much time I want. I'd like smart cities to be cities that don't get in the way of my day.
Absolutely.
That's my definition of a smart city that has the green wave on the traffic lights. So while you approach, traffic lights get green and you don't stop. So avoiding queues and avoiding cars idling, you reduce pollution. There's a lot of offshoots from a smart city, but basically a city that is intelligent enough to not be in the way, so you don't see the technology that is helping you. That is a smart city from my point of view.
I agree totally. Is anybody actually implementing the green light thing? Does anybody know?
Yeah, bizarrely enough, we've got it in Salisbury. So our medieval city actually has smart traffic lights. So as long as you drive through at, I think it's 40 miles an hour, you can, as long as it's not rush hour, you can get from one side of the city to the other without actually being stopped at a traffic light.
That depends on whether there's other people coming perpendicular, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and when things are extremely busy during rush hour times, then you are going to get a bit congested. But if you go at like 9 o'clock in the evening, you can go from one side to the other without stopping at all. And sometimes it hurts when we go to places like the US, when they got these brain dead traffic lights that seem to take forever to change, and they're not sequenced at all. So the whole thing is just very, very painful.
Yeah, some cities are awful. Where I was recently in the States, there was a single intersection. Everything was fine everywhere except this one intersection, which took if you got stopped there, whether you're turning left, right, well, right, you can do on red sometimes, but if you were turning left or going straight, it took maybe 5 minutes, and 5 minutes is like 2 hours for some. It feels like 2 hours.
Yeah. And when you've had a good traffic sequencing system and you've experienced it, then the level of frustration you get when you find a place where you don't have it is enormous.
Yeah, there are downsides there though, because Perth, as small cities as it is, has intelligent traffic lights. So there are sensors on top that see a car approaching, and all lights are on red if there is no traffic. And as soon as you approach the car, the traffic lights turns to green. But if you get too fast, and because the light is already green and you're hurrying up a bit to get the green light, it turns to red to stop you because you're going too fast. So it is a little bit too smart for my liking.
I quite like that. I think that's clever.
No, you got to stop people from speeding constantly.
Yeah, of course.
So I think we're all bringing up slices of the smart city concept, sort of the harmonization again of all these different things. But to go back to your point, Randy, about identity, I said workable identity. And I think, I think many people completely share your view that we don't want to be identified 24/7 by 365. They're part of the workable identity is having a spectrum where we've got absolute identity going to absolute anonymous identity. And that's really what I think.
You're absolutely right there, Jay. There's no reason why a person can't have multiple persona. And then you just use the appropriate persona for what you want to do at that time. So, for example, parking your car in a parking space, the only attribute you need is a lump of money, lump of credit.
Yeah.
People don't need to know anything else about you. Or buying a coffee, again, you might have a persona just for buying coffee, and they don't need to know anything else about you apart from what type of coffee you like.
There is a difference between those two, though. A vehicle in general is taxed in some way. It has some legal presence on the road, whereas a cup of coffee is a cup of coffee.
Well, that's true. Yeah, different persona will have different attributes to it, but there's no reason why all of those persona need to be joined up into one single identity, so that when you park your car, they know everything about you. I mean, there's no point in that, is there?
Well, I foresee if accounting becomes that, in other words, you say you're a resident of a place. This is a common situation. You're a resident, so you have a deal, a subscription, and you can park, in your neighborhood or whatever. And as a result, you're probably identifiable. I don't see how they could do it otherwise, which means, first of all, that they can read your license plate, and that's already being done, apparently. And second of all, think about this for a second. What if someone wanted to commit a murder of somebody's spouse and then hacked into the system to frame the person by placing that person there instead of themselves? I know that's, in a way, it's far-fetched, and in another way, it's not at all.
Well, it's not far-fetched at all, Randy, because the fellows that I showed you that are experts in augmented reality, virtual reality, we're talking about how video, which would seem, immutable and, couldn't be messed with, can now be very much messed with.
Completely.
And you can basically create whatever you want. So I think you're absolutely right that we are facing multiple questions, fundamental questions and challenges in this, exploding realm of technology that we don't know the answers to. We don't know how it's going to work, where you've got a broader spectrum than what we have now, from complete identity to complete anonymous identity. And it's, it's somewhat akin to our burner phones, where you could go buy a phone over the counter for cash, and all of a sudden that telephone number that used to be a pretty good identifier means nothing. So,
Actually, interrupting you for a second, in my friends here who are in the United Kingdom and Scotland, do you have burner phones? Because I don't think we do here. I think all phones are registered, are they not?
Yeah, you can have burner phones. You can go into a shop like Poundland and just pick up a SIM card, which you use once and then just chuck it in the river.
Or we have that here. It's a little
Now, there are a whole raft of different applications you can put on your smartphone, which will issue you with a number, which you can make and receive calls on. Normally, the super cheap ones are supported by advertising. So you watch a couple of adverts and you get 5 minutes worth of calling time.
Not 100% sure that we have burner phones in this country. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen them.
I don't think you do. I think France and Belgium in particular.
And Germany. Think about this a minute, because you guys have all,
and Germany.
and all that. When you get when you want to get a DID, you have to have a proof of residence.
Yes.
Residence, whatever the word is.
And Italy too, same.
Yeah, exactly. Because, back in the day when we were all excited about VoIP, right? The V word, sorry. I'm sorry. The V word. When we were all excited, all of us here were excited. Well, Jay, I don't know, but the rest of us were big time excited about VoIP. Back in the day, and as soon as somebody came up with something, like SIPGate in Germany, I went through the page with Google Translate and got the German number. I have no use for it, but we just had to go through that. But the point is, anyway, that I believe you have to furnish an address. Now, there are companies that will do that for you. So, yes, if you're a master criminal, you could probably make this happen somehow. But the point is, I don't think that in the drugstore racks in France and maybe in Belgium, I don't believe that you can just buy a phone any more than you could just buy a gun in a gun shop, because there are no gun shops of that type here.
No, yeah.
Well,
there's a difference.
It's
orgasm, by the way. It just means that you can't just decide one day you're going to go buy one.
No, yeah, but the difference is that here in the UK we have SIMs that are based on a recurring contract that you have to sign, you have to and everything else, and pay as you go that have a credit loaded on, and you can use it, and you can then chuck it away when the credit has been used.
So the pay as
you can buy them anonymously and stick them in a phone. You get a number. They're already primed with a number. They run, and that's it. You can recharge them if you want, but if you just need a burner, that's the way.
I think we're looking at a reality going forward where you have different types of number. So individuals should be able to get a burner number, because there are a number of legitimate uses for it. So take, for example, when you're communicating with Uber, an Uber driver, you don't want to give the Uber driver your real telephone number. So you want to
they may have your address if you're coming to pick you up at home. They would have your address if you're coming to pick up.
Well, they'll have an address, but probably not your address.
Yeah, you can get a pickup anywhere, somewhere else, 200 meters of far.
Indeed. So, but for the duration of that transaction, you want to have a means of communicating with the guy who's going to pick you up, and then after that's finished, you never want to talk to him ever again. So it's a legitimate use case, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
It's very much a legitimate use case, and the notion that everybody's registering their telephone numbers, I can't really speak to foreign countries. However, even when the phone number supposedly is tied to a definitive identity, that can also be defeated. So this week, I think it was announced that AT&T is being sued for $224 million by someone who had their phone basically hijacked and lost $24 million in cryptocurrency. So they're suing for the $24 million replacement of the value plus $200 million, I think, in punitive damages. So, and it was clearly a unauthorized, let's put it, transfer of service. And this is a big, big problem. I've spent years and years on this via the North American Numbering Council, looking at ways that, you can get authentication and authorization for transferring a number, and it's still elusive.
Yeah, it's called slamming here in the UK. Oh. You can't take anyone's number and transfer it to someone else or to yourself. Communication providers like my company can do that at a click of a mouse, just knowing a little details. If you are ready to make a few bucks or to run a scam, it's terribly easy to do.
Slamming technically is a term that
Quick break here, a
That's
comedic break. Then Surf and what's his name who invented the web?
Ted
Berners-Lee.
Berners-Lee. Both of those fellows were at the Decentralized Web Summit, by the way.
And who knows,
So-
that may have been taken from that, but it's a cute photo. I couldn't help it. Sorry.
I would say
Yeah,
that's
that's
probably
actually
been
quite- yeah,
photoshopped.
That's quite a good photo.
It
No,
may,
I don't.
actually,
I
it may
don't-
have been Photoshop, but it's funny.
Yeah, it is funny. But in any case, this is a big issue, and the use cases that we're talking about are very much at the heart of this identity question. And like this $224 million suit against AT&T, there's some serious things on the table around the identity piece. And as you mentioned, Randy, identity is a broader spectrum than complete identity all the time. And I think James is talking about, and Corrado and Andy would probably chime in the same, is identity that we control is a whole lot different than somebody tracking us that we have no clue who they are, what they're going to use the information associated with our identity for. And I think that's another dimension of workable identity, is that clearly, we have control of our own identity, and we can disclose parts of our identity to various people at different times in different contexts. And I think another thing that you were talking about, Randy, is we want to be able to have people operate on our behalf, like our wives and friends and so forth, where they kind of take over our identity in certain times and contexts. And as James said, we all have different dimensions to our identity, different profiles, personas, if you will. So all these things are key to the pending, and I would say growing, question of how do we create workable identity, especially in these very connected realms that are happening with smart cities, with traffic lights, with parking meters, with payments. All this stuff is coming together.
Okay.
So that's my little rant.
Another aspect, Jay, is considering how we secure and then recover identities and everything that goes with it if you lose the keys. I mean, this is really, really important. I mean, we all lose and forget our passwords, our keys.
Wait a minute, James. Is this
periodically?
Are we
No,
getting?
no, that doesn't happen.
Are we getting?
That's age.
Are we getting back to the $1 million that you lost on Bitcoin because you don't remember?
No, I'm deliberately not going there. But the lesson has been learned. It's essential that you have a mechanism to recover identities or passwords or accounts.
Chip in the head.
When people lose the key, and so you've got to come up with a method which is secure enough, which probably means not one factor, not two factors, not three factors, probably four or more out of a raft of perhaps a dozen factors that you
or
can
chip
use.
in the head.
Biometrics will undoubtedly be a key part of this. So if you can authenticate with your fingerprint or your iris or your voice print or even just your face.
Boy, voice print scares me. I really have no confidence. Face is bad. So I'll put it in the order, and you guys can argue.
Why is
wait a minute. Let's get the order. So you've got your PIN, which is pretty limited, right? What is it? 10,000 for 4 digits, barely. You've got your face recognition, facial recognition, which is, let's face it. I mean, a lot of people could impersonate you that way. You got your fingerprint. They've shown on several phones that's not actually that great either.
No.
So,
well, you're right, but each method has a certain level of security associated with it. No one factor on its own is 100% secure.
So we need 4.
So the way that you build up your security is you perm multiple factors together, and then you get the security multiplied by the other factor multiplied by the next factor, and you end up with something which is pretty damn secure. But
Or you have a chip in your brain.
What the hell is that?
Well, there's another. You're absolutely right, James, about all the different factors starting to be part of the attestation of your identity. But there's also another approach, which is called multi-signature constructs in the blockchain world, where it takes 2 out of 3, let's say, parties to facilitate a transaction. So in that case, you know, it might be Jay's wife, and a trusted third party like James Bodie or whatever, and it takes 2 of those 3 in order to transact something above a certain threshold, or, you know, within a certain
Indeed. And
parameters.
That's the sort of thing that you want in a business or organization, or something like a city council, where you need multiple people to sign off to make things happen.
So you're talking circle of trust, like PGP, right?
Yeah. Also, these transactions need to happen out of band, not in the same system and through the same system, through the same connectivity that the transaction is made.
Yeah, out of band, you can add a huge amount of security. But then again, you can tie in other things like geographic location and time. So if you can tie down a transaction to a physical place at a certain time, then there can be a huge element of security in that as well.
Yeah, banks do that already. If a transaction on your credit card is made in a location that is not corresponding to where you usually are or where you were to make the last transaction 3 hours ago, you cannot be in Sydney and New York at the same time.
Yeah, and as long as you can prove that you physically were somewhere else, as long as you've got your alibi sorted out, then you're fine. And by the way, smartphones these days, both Apple and Android devices, record exactly where you go all the time. And I don't know whether you've ever gone through the exercise of looking back at your Google snail trail.
I always do, because I need to know where I've been. So it's the only way I remember what I did, and so I can invoice people.
Yeah,
it's the only way I use.
It's very useful, and I delete it every once in a while. But it's true that sometimes you want to know, well, what time, how long.
You delete it? Why would you ever want to delete
the history?
it?
Oh, because I don't need it. When I deleted
well,
it.
How do you know that you don't need it?
Well, I don't know. If I'm accused of murder, it might come in handy. But
it could be your alibi. Exactly.
But why would you ever want to delete your snail trail? Well, I don't understand why anybody would ever want to.
This is a great question that I wanted to get into, because it's fashionable now to have these articles. There's a lot of articles about getting out of the whole Google thing for a lot of reasons. And I'm absolutely not against, I mean, I'm part of that whole thing too. But the point is, you've got Google Maps. You sometimes maybe do reviews of places, and then they start asking you, well, wait a minute, you were here. What do you think? And further, with all the different things, for example, Google knows so much about me now already, even if I erase stuff, that, well, let me back up. I saw an article recently that a guy went to a coffee shop and was talking to a friend about something, let's say roofing tiles. I don't know what it was about. And he said, and then that day he saw an ad for roofing tiles. And he goes, I don't think that Google, or was it Facebook? I don't remember. I don't think that they're actually listening to me. But his point was, and this was a good point, that they actually do know so much about you that they knew that you were talking and thinking about this stuff. They didn't know they were talking and they weren't listening to the recording. But the machine learning, because I don't use the term AI, figured out that you were recorded the fact that you're interested in that. What I see is the articles that come up when I look at the news. This is so accurate. It's It's I can't think of the word for it. It's unsettling, I guess is the best word I can think of.
Spooky.
What's that?
Spooky.
Well, spooky's a better word, actually. Yeah, it's spooky. You understand. All of us here understand it, that they're following everything you do. As you said, they've got your location within what, a couple of meters, literally.
Yeah.
I love to see, you know, where my wife is and how long it's going to take her to get home, so I can practice the saxophone before she comes in and doesn't want to hear it.
Well, you mean you don't have that? I have the spouse alert.
Oh yeah. I don't have the spouse alert. Tell me about the spouse alert.
So I get a 5-10 minute warning.
Oh, is that an app?
Well, yeah, and I have push notification.
That's probably
and I have the option of when I'm alone in the house, I can get that push through if this then that to play on the house entertainment system, and I suppose I could even have it flashing red lights when she's coming down the warning lights when she's coming down the road.
That's a good one. Well, we're talking
in order that I can be ready to greet her in a manner in which she likes to be greeted.
Of course, and that goes for both spouses and both sexes, obviously. Wives can be lovers, etc., etc. Hey, little girl, you know, the little song from my youth. Anyway, James, you're a big fan of the Amazon universe. I constantly see every day something comes up. You can get 3 Amazon dots for $75. This is another thing. When we went to our Airbnb, the fellow said, "Well, you know, you've got an Echo, I think it is, right? Is that where you say the name Alexa, or is it Alexa? What's the name of that device? The first one."
Echo is one of them.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he had an Amazon device there. First thing I did was totally unplug it. First, I turned the mic off. Then I thought, well, we're not going to use this anyway. Let's just unplug it. And we were perfectly happy without it. But I know that there are people who love that. But the thing is, this is yet another channel where, you know, you're basically tracked and hounded by ads and so on.
Yeah, but so what? As long as the benefit that you get out of these devices and these services is beneficial to you, then you know what, I'm willing to share some information about myself. It's not a problem to me. I'm not one of these who goes around going, "Oh no, I'm really scared about people knowing everything about me." And you know what? Google doesn't know everything about me.
Oh, they know more about me than my wife does, frankly. But James,
I don't think they do.
Well, some things they don't know. But James, it isn't that I'm worried about X company knowing more about me, but in particular, Amazon. I'm really trying to calm down on the Amazon ordering because they do know too much. They really do. And as a result,
what would you define as too much?
Anything is too much. Okay. John Irvin is saying you should stop saying Alexa. Alexa, order me some toilet paper immediately. All right. And James is saying,
Alexa,
the other James,
order more sex toys.
A case of Red Bull. Yeah. Red Bull is another thing I'm not into, but anyway.
On the Amazon thing, I don't know if you looked at the VUC accounts on the Amazon. I just bought a couple of little pluggy thingy. How they're called?
Pluggy thingy.
But we don't get anything on it. It never works, right, Corrado? So
never works. Oh, that's bad.
I'll take a look. That's the
Amazon Fire TV.
I get 3 emails. Well, that's like, what, 37 pounds or something?
They were discounted for the bank holiday weekend. So they were $34.99.
Oh, well, yeah, 35. We'll get 35 pence. Anyway, yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I've got most of these dongly things, and I have to admit, I quite like the Amazon Fire TV things, particularly with the speaky remote control, because one of the biggest problems with these sophisticated devices is trying to work out how to drive them. And if you can just press a button and say, play Silent Witness or whatever, and it just plays it.
Yeah.
Even my dear darling mother-in-law can handle that one.
Yeah, it's the interface of those smart TV things that is always a bit fiddly because you don't have a full keyboard. So if you need to search for something, it takes ages with the cursors and things. If there's voice recognition that works properly, it's easier. It's a more humane way of searching. Going back to a thing that it popped into my mind a few minutes earlier, I've seen a judgment passed in the United States about the fact that an IP address is not acceptable as a form of identification. Someone was sued by a company that published an Adam Sandler movie, and someone downloaded it.
I can't imagine why anybody want to watch that, but yeah,
exactly.
Great article, interesting point, Corrado. Certainly.
Yeah, so the IP address of a shared connection, even in a family connection, is no longer acceptable legally to determine that someone did something, and also the court through the owner or the registered owner of the connection should be legally responsible for what happens that is not legally acceptable. That is going to change, though, when we are all moving to IPv6. So every single device has its own IP address. So if you own that device, is the registered owner of that device, you cannot hide behind the anonymity of natted or patted IP address.
Now that is, interesting.
Because this was a senior home or something like that.
Yes, an old citizen's home.
Oh, whatever the proper term is. I'm one of them, so I can't really. But
I'm
anyway,
54. I'm very close.
Okay, you're behind a few years, but the point is, this was a problem, and he had. I think I saw $12,000 in legal fees that were awarded to this person because once you get a strike against you of any of these things, particularly in the United States, which is such a litigious country, you immediately have to hire a lawyer, and you're going to talk about at least $10,000, maybe a lot more if you actually have to pursue it without settlement. So that's a terrible. We're coming up on the hour.
I've got something else I just want to comment on. Something that has sprung up here in the UK countryside, a new means of tracking people about up on the A354 Salisbury to Blandford Road, and a device on a pole popped up there, and me being me, I immediately thought, oh, that's interesting. Stopped the car, got out, and investigated because I wanted to know what the hell it was.
I can imagine James sniffing around the pole.
Sniffing around.
What
identifying. Well, I became a bit of a spotter. So things like boxes on telegraph poles now, I now know exactly what each shape does, and they're all different and they have different functions. But anyway, this particular box turned out to be a long-range Bluetooth detector. So what this thing does, it's a thing, and you can Googleize it. It's something called Bluetooth. Bluetooth. You can Googleize that. It's got a range of about 50 meters. And what this thing, sorry?
Googleize? Bye, Jay.
Thank you. Googleize it. So it's called Bluetooth. And what it does is it tags the MAC address of any Bluetooth device that goes past it. So we're talking about car kits, so car hands-free. We're talking about the phones of anybody who's sitting in the car who's left their Bluetooth on. You're even picking up things like Apple Watches and Fitbits as they go past. So the great thing about that, if you're in the security services, I suppose, is that you're tagging the fact that a person was at a certain place at a certain time in a certain car. How useful is that? And if you can put these things on main thoroughfares, you immediately have a means of tracking people and actually looking for people that you may want to track.
Yeah,
bad
because
people.
because Bluetooth addresses are like MAC addresses. They are unique to the device.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's a secure and well, it's an identification. You can spoof it, of course.
Yeah, and of course the Bluetooth has a cover story, which is that it's there for traffic flow analysis.
Mm.
But you can bet your bottom dollar that all of the police and security services will have access to the information. So
Well, that's clearly a false claim, isn't it? I mean, you don't need an electronic record of a Bluetooth ID to show traffic flow. I mean, to be honest, you need a camera.
well, that's the
Not
way
even that. There are magnetic loops.
Yeah, you could do it that way.
In just on the road, you can see that on motorways.
Yeah, but that's true.
Big square cut in and a track that goes to the side of the road. There's a big, massive magnetic sensor that counts how many pieces of metal run over.
And it's things like this that make people really hate government agencies when they're abusing data, collecting data on you for no reason.
Well, I wouldn't say no reason.
I think there is no legitimate reason for doing it.
No, besides no legitimate reason, it's all data, big data that is sitting somewhere waiting to be exploited by someone else.
Yes. Okay. Well,
the security is usually crap.
Let me ask a slightly different question. What happens then when you have a locally owned system, say Chalk Mobile, which is capable of tracking endpoints as they move through the Chalk Valley? Is that something that would make you mad, Andy?
I've never thought it's a brilliant idea, and I didn't say I was mad. I just said that people get upset with agencies when they misrepresent reasons and and abuse data. If they say that they are collecting data on everyone who passes is here to check whether the car taxed properly because they haven't got ANPR or something like that, then that's not unreasonable. It's a case of just being honest.
Exactly. Be upfront. Say what you want to do with that. That's all.
Yeah, and car tax recognition is a really good reason for having these things out there, because you don't have tax discs anymore in UK. In the olden days, Randy, when you pay your motor tax, this is annual fee for having a car on the road.
Yeah.
You used to receive a coloured paper disc that you put in the front of your car.
We have that too. Sure.
Yeah, but not anymore. We don't have those anymore.
No, it's all based on ANPR, automatic nameplate recognition. We have nameplates. I don't know if those outside of the UK know, that have to have a specific font and specific colors and specific sizes, so they are compliant with automatic nameplate recognition.
You're talking about license plates? No?
License plates, yes. No. Front and back. The front is white, back is yellow, but a specific color of shade of yellow, and the letters have to be in a specific font, a specific thickness, a specific color, so they are readable automatically by the ANPR cameras.
So it's rather than it's going back to the system I spoke of earlier, which is it's instead of being a physical thing that you have to show, which is in the United States, those are tags usually, depending on the state. You have a tag that says you're paid up for the end of the year. What you're saying is this is in a database, and if somebody looks you up, they know it.
Well, it's a database that is open to anyone. You can check if a car is has been registered with.
Why would anyone
is taxed or not?
Why would you care, other than if you're law enforcement, though? That's strange.
I don't know why, but yeah.
My neighbor didn't pay his tax.
Well,
snitching, clipping, as we say in Scotland.
I would be very concerned about drivers driving vehicles which are not insured. I want to be sure that every vehicle on the road around me is insured, just in case he hits me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you,
insurance
how do you,
the tax. Everything.
how do you know that the person driving the car is the person who is insured to drive that car? Then?
Getting better, yeah.
Well, that's why you need something like Bluetooth to check on that.
There you go. Circling back.
I think, yeah. We're circling back. Okay, porn truth. That's what we need. All right. I think we've gone over by almost 6 minutes now. Any final?
Well, yeah, considering we came in with absolutely nothing to talk about, we've actually done reasonably well, haven't we?
There's always something to talk about, James. There are many subjects we didn't even broach today that could have been.
Well, you mentioned one at the end there, and we haven't talked at all about porn.
Yeah, I would like to talk more about it, but I'd rather do it. Not the porn.
Enough.
Never mind. But, I think that
we need to talk over the things that are required to make a workable porn system.
Oh God! Well, I think the main thing is that we need to go to the mature audiences only segment, don't you?
Of course.
So I think if everything is right, we may be able to do this with the audio this time. And I don't hear it. Why don't I hear it?
Because you haven't pressed the right button again, Randy.
Bloody hell. All right, never mind that.